I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. The quote for this episode comes from Earl Nightingale and says, "Whatever we plant in our minds and nourish with repetition and emotion will one day become a reality." Dr. Caroline Leaf is a world-renowned neuroscientist, communication pathologist, and author. With over 40 years of groundbreaking research, Dr. Leaf has pioneered the understanding of how our thoughts shape our brain, behaviors, and overall well-being. At the heart of her mission is the science of neuroplasticity, which is the brain's incredible ability to change and rewire itself. Through her work, Dr. Leaf empowers people to actively direct this process, rewiring harmful patterns, fostering emotional strength, and creating habits for lifelong success. She's spoken on stages all over the world. Her best-selling books have helped millions, and today she's here with us. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to shift from survival mode to success, why anxiety is a signal, not your identity, why most habits don't stick and what to do instead, and how to rewire your thinking using neuroplasticity. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Dr. Caroline Leaf. Caroline, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, James. It's wonderful to be here with you.
We've had such a great chat offline. So I just want to acknowledge you, first of all, for all your amazing work that you've done. So I know we've got a lot of good stuff to get into today.
Oh, well, thank you, James. I appreciate that. And you too. As you said, we were having a whole pre-interview before the whole discussion.
That's right.
To start the show.
Yeah, we should have started recording half an hour ago.
I agree.
Well, to kick things off, who was the first person to believe in you?
Oh, that's a great question. From very young, I would say probably my parents, but my husband has been incredible. We've been married for 40 years and he's always believed in my mission and just understood what I'm trying to do. And then I had two professors at university. So I've given you already 5 people, but 2 professors at university that went all the way through my honors, master's, PhD with me. They just saw from the beginning that, because it was very much out of my field what I was doing, it wasn't the norm, but they supported, and I think that was really, and gave me the courage to really pursue the avenues that I was going in, the direction I was going in.
So a common theme we've had with guests on the show, and myself too in my own story, is that you don't necessarily have the belief in yourself at a young age. You have mentors and maybe educators, parents, other people around you who can transfer the belief that they have in you. It's almost like you borrow that energy, and then once you have that momentum, you can start to take a lot of action yourself.
Definitely. I think what happens with people when you bounce, we need connection, communication, but sometimes we need the other perspective to help us think in a broader way and go deeper. And so bouncing those ideas, or you say something and someone encourages that, it just helps you to see more and to believe in yourself more. So for sure, I agree with that.
And you were a real pioneer in neuroplasticity. When were you first aware of just how powerful it could be?
It was at university I think it was one of our very first lectures in med school, and the professor was going on about neuroscience. Neuroscience was very, very new. It was more neurology, the term that was used at that stage. And he started explaining about how the mind changes the brain, which is totally correct. Then he said, but the brain actually can't change once it's damaged. And it was that statement. I will never forget that statement. He said, the brain, once it's damaged, that's it. You have to then just work around compensation. And immediately I remember putting up my hand and listen, science 40 years ago, more men than women in the room, which is sad, but that was the reality. And I just said, this can't be true, because we as humans constantly are experiencing new things. So our mind uses the brain. So therefore, if we are changing and growing, the brain's got to do the same thing. And neuroplasticity wasn't actually a thing until the mid-90s. And this professor turned around and just said, oh, well, do the research. And I said, well, what area? And he said, well, head injury. There's literally no research on it. He was actually being sarcastic, because at that stage, there was no research on people, very little, on people who had brain damage or brain trauma and recovery, because they just thought, well, what's the point? It's damage. Just teach them to compensate. So I started doing research on that and started showing that with directed mind input, when you really manage your mind and grow your mind and all the things that go around mind, mindset, win the day concepts, etc., you will actually create structural change in your brain, and that will show up as changes in your cognitive, social, emotional, behavioral, all that stuff. And that's what happened. And so that was some of the earliest neuroplasticity research we saw from the CT scans, how the brain changed in response. And then we learned that brain is constantly being changed by the mind. So yeah, that's where it started.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And when were you aware of a patient taking agency in their own healing journey and just how transformational that could be?
Probably when I was doing a lot of work in the hospital, we saw that as soon as you started working with someone and showing them that, you know what, this is your situation, but if you do this, this, and this, you can change things. And when they made that choice, key was choice. And working with my first subject that I used for the head injury research, traumatic brain injury, and working with thousands of clients since then and reaching millions, the key has always been, you can tell someone what to do, you can share all the techniques, but the key was choice. So when they chose to actually apply and do it no matter what and get up every time they, so-called failed, instead of failure, they learned, that attitude that we talk about all the time, that made the difference between someone who could explain everything to me and knew what to do versus the person who actually applied it. They chose to do it and to push through every obstacle. That choice was massive.
What I think about there is how there could be a book that someone gets, a book that's going to change their life. 100 people will read it and do nothing with it. And there'll be one person in that group who says, you know what, I will take action on what I learn, and that will go and change their life. What is it about some people who just, they go and consume the exact same material and their lives just don't change?
I don't like to sort of categorize, but I think it's a very common problem that we have started seeing in the last 50 to 60, 70 years. There's been a shift in how we as humans function. And this has been a lot of the research that I've done as well, and what I've observed through the work in clinical trials and so on. The shift has been away from mind and onto brain. So neuroplasticity, as we learned about neuroplasticity, as we learned more in the mid-90s, we got fMRI technology and various different types of technology that were very exciting because now you could start seeing inside the brain. So our society became very neurocentric, brain-focused. And then people have mixed up brain and mind, and that's something we should really dive into. Since people mixed up brain and mind, and what I mean by that is they focused on the brain. Brain is everything. Your brain makes you do this. Your amygdala makes you do this. All the stuff we read about all the time. Your brain's stuck in this pattern. Your brain. A neurocentric society is a very physicalist society. So it's all about the physical. When you focus on the physical alone, you lose the greatest component of who you are as a human, which is your mind. Your mind is not your brain. It's two separate things. So when we don't focus on the mind, which is 99% of who we are, enough, we're going to have the situation where knowledge is just gained as data and it's literally coded, but people aren't applying it because they're not really thinking it through. So we have to change back to become a more thinking society, more, like that famous sculpture by David, the thinker, Socrates question, that kind of Socratic kind of thinking, that has changed a lot. It's shifting back. There's definitely a shift in awareness. So I think that is a massive contribution, long answer to a very important question. But if we don't focus enough on mind, thinking about things deeply, questioning, being curious, not just automatic responses, not just surface responses, but really going deep, we're not going to apply. We're just going to gather data because it's so easy to gather data with our technological age. It's great. We've got access to information, but having access doesn't take you deep. We can't just have access. We've got to select and go deep. Because as humans, our whole mind-brain-body connection, our psychoneurobiology is designed to be fed, to grow. And if you just know bits and pieces of all kinds of things, you don't grow in a way that actually enhances who you are and how you function. And that's why people get stuck just gathering data. They don't apply. Whereas if you select, I'm going to do this one thing well, and you really go deep, that's when people grow as humans. So I think that's the problem. We become very surface focused.
Yeah, it's such an important distinction. Yet a lot of people who they say, look, I just had these negative thoughts just pop into my mind all day. How much control do people really have over their thoughts?
Huge amount. But in our very materialistic, physicalist view, neurocentric society, we kind of told that, if you've got all these thoughts, there's something wrong with your brain. You've got ADHD or you've got some kind of label. And if that was helping people, I'd be happy. But that approach has actually shown that it's made things worse. So instead of helping people to recognize that what is a thought, what is an intrusive thought, how do I manage them, what is the power in my mind that I have to manage those thoughts, what are thoughts, we don't spend enough time on that. We're spending more time on, there's that thought's giving you anxiety. So the person will focus, you have a lot of intrusive thoughts that aren't controlled. You're going to have anxiety. And that anxiety is hovering and it makes you feel physically ill. You go to the doctor because you're so anxious and you feel ill. They're going to label you and give you medication. So it's externalized. The internal focus has kind of gone away. And I'm talking very generally because it's obviously there's balance in what I'm saying. But essentially that then becomes almost like, how do I control this? I can't control. I have no control. So not we, because that's not my approach, but the general approach of a materialistic view or a physicalist view is one of any toxic thoughts, any emotions, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, that is coming from something that's broken in your genes, your brain, your body. That's the causes in the physical. Meanwhile, thoughts are things that we create with our mind. Your brain doesn't create anything. Your brain doesn't do anything. It just is a responder. Your mind is doing everything. Your mind thinks, feels, and chooses. It's your aliveness. It's how you experience life. And your mind is this energy force that then puts that energy into the brain and codes it into the brain. So simply being coded in the brain's not generating the thought. The brain is just holding the data. It doesn't have any context or anything. So if you do open brain surgery, for example, and you stimulate different parts of the brain, people will recall data, but with their mind, because they're awake, they'll tell you what that data means. So a thought will pop up, a memory will pop up, and maybe an image of something and an emotion. But until they say, oh, yes, this, and then they build the story around that, that's mind. So essentially, in a nutshell, our thoughts are things that come from our experiences, and we have millions and millions of experiences. And if we don't organize those thoughts, they can feel overwhelming. So we have the power to actually capture each thought, quite literally, and analyze it. So if you wake up in the morning or you get woken up in the morning and there's this massive thoughts, this crescendo of thoughts popping up in your mind, and it wakes you up and you can't, and it's overwhelming and you're feeling anxious and you can't sleep, or you get, typical, and then you go through the day and you kind of what we need to do is realize that, okay, those thoughts are real things. We created them with our mind. They are related to an experience. A thought is just memories clustered together from an experience. So you have an experience, and there's this experience, that experience, all the different experiences you have during the course of the day and of your life, and those build into thoughts. And they're real things. We create, like Einstein's E equals mc squares, in energy makes matter. We make these real things. We code them into the brain. They're part of us. So when they're coming up, it's a network in our mind, brain, body connection. So we can stop, become aware, and we can manage those. If we don't manage them, it's just this chaos. And by managing them, and it's totally doable. It's just a matter of training yourself to, first of all, knowing that you can do it. And then it's knowing how to do it, which is mind management. So it's a matter of, okay, let me stop. These thoughts are coming up. This thought, this thought, this thought, this thought. Okay, what's relevant now? I can't handle it all now. I've got to get ready for work, get kids ready for school, whatever. But these thoughts are coming up now. So let me take each one and do what I can with each one. And the rest I'll deal with later. Maybe put a note in your phone. And then this is very disruptive. Right now it's going to affect my day. Let me manage this thought. And we can talk about that exact process, because there's an exact formula that you can apply to control that thought. So long answer to the fact that yes, we can control thoughts. Thoughts are real things that we've created. Therefore, we can fix them. We can change them. We can manage them. We can do what we want with them. They don't control us.
I'd love to talk about that process. But first of all, what about the role of environment, food you eat, relationships, the people around you? What's the role of all those things and the thoughts that we have? And then perhaps we can dive into the process that you just mentioned.
Absolutely. So we don't live in isolation. We live in an environment. We live with people. So experiences are all related to that. So every experience you have, it's with people, like we having an experience. You have a family, you have work that you do, et cetera, et cetera. You coach people, et cetera, all these different things. Everything you go through from the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep, those are experiences made up of the people in your environment, the culture, the political, the socioeconomic. All of those are the details of each thought that you are building. So this is a thought about this interview. Before this, you were maybe doing some other work. In your work, there's different things going on. Those are all different thoughts. There's the thought about your relationship with your wife, what's going on in your wife's life and her work, and your two children, and all that. Those are all different thoughts. So all our experiences we kind of call it our epigenetics. You've probably heard of that word. All creates the data that go into the thought. And our mind, the deepest part of our mind has different levels. The deepest part, which is called the non-conscious, not unconscious, not subconscious, non-conscious, that part processes everything very, very fast. It's beyond space and time. And it processes that and puts that into the brain as a code and the body as a code. And then we become aware of it consciously in our conscious mind in little spurts as we go through the day. Environment plays a huge role. Environment provides the data for the thought, in summary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned labels earlier. That's something that you and I are perfectly aligned on. This idea of applying negative labels to people, so those people then identify maybe it's sick or I can't do this. I'm not a fan of those labels at all. I would rather give someone a false positive label, something aspirational that if a kid is hitting, reminding them that they're kind and gentle and use their strength in different ways rather than giving someone a negative label that is reinforcing that belief in their own mind.
Oh, you're spot on. And, this is what's grown out of what we call the biomedical model, which is about 50, 60, 70 years old. Probably closer to 50, but it started about 70 years ago. And it basically is this whole concept of neurocentrism, physicalism, materialism. So it's the whole thing that your brain is the boss and your brain generates thoughts as a sort of side effect. And therefore, everything is controlled by the brain. And therefore, if you are too busy or too anxious or whatever, you get a label. It's based on the medical model. So if you have, for example, diabetes, you're going to have certain symptoms. They can do tests. They can find that you've got a problem with your insulin and your pancreas, et cetera, and they can direct medication. Now, that works for the physical body, the physical brain and the body. That's 1% of who we are. It doesn't work for mind. Mind is that 99. It drives, it animates the body. When you are dead, your mind is no longer in your body disintegrates. Your mind animates the body, makes it work, plus it also is our psychology. So, therefore, a label is very limiting because it basically it shifts you away from your mind power, your superpower, which is your mind, and it shifts you into being stuck in your biology. I am. You're not. You can't be depression. You can't have ADHD. It's a behavioral experience. And anxiety and depression are emotional signals. ADHD type behaviors are behavioral signals. So it's not I am anxious or I have anxiety or I have this disorder or I have this bipolar. You can't have them because having them, a label implies a diagnosis. A diagnosis implies there's somewhere in the brain and the body that's causing that, and therefore we can target with a medication. Doesn't work with mind. That's what psychiatry is built on. It's been disproved. You can't track back a label to a source in our biology. You can track that label, if you turn that label into a description, adding on the positive side that you were saying, yes, you're doing this, but you could do that, the aspirational side, and track it back to what in our environment has led to you showing up like this. In other words, if you are showing up in a certain way, there's a because of behind it. That's a much more expansive view to rather turn a label into a description and look at the because of and look at our environment than to say that that's a biological problem. Sure, the mind works through the brain. So if you constantly are negative, have a negative mindset, you see this with the work you do, constantly think, I can't get this right, I'll never get this right. That's an actual network that you build into the mind-brain-body connection. It's a toxic network. And that network is counter to the biology of the brain and the body and the mind connection, the whole mind-brain-body connection. And counter meaning that it works against our biology. So it creates inflammation in the brain and the body. So if you don't manage your mind, that then makes your body vulnerable to disease. So there's an impact. It's like battering our brain and our body with the wrong information. And so therefore we need to rewire that. So labeling locks people in, keeps people stuck, takes away hope, and that in itself is a toxic physical protein network that we will build into our brain, and that blocks our ability to move forward and creates vulnerability to disease because of the impact. So it's quite dangerous to label.
It is so important what you just said there. Rewind, go and listen to that again. When I was young, debilitating anxiety, that was something that just crushed me, high school, young adult. And the label of, first of all, I didn't even know what it was at that age. But looking back on, we were talking offline about Napoleon Hill and the work of the Napoleon Hill Foundation with their flagship book, Think and Grow Rich, but it just as easily could have been titled Think and Grow Poor, because you will those circumstances into your life. And I realized the anxiety issues that I would have when it was at its absolute worst, I was willing those negative scenarios to happen, and inevitably they would. And I would look at everything else, like environment, the food that I was eating, the sleep that I was not getting, all of those things that contributed to it. The moment that I got all of those things dialed in and understood breath and everything else that you just mentioned, then my issues with that reduced maybe 95%. And then over the next 10 years, it's gone almost completely. I still feel it, but I haven't had any real issues with it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. First of all, anxiety is a very normal emotion. We need it. We need it as humans because there's good anxiety, but you've got to know how to make it work for you. It was consuming you and it was not working for you, but there was a because of behind it. So yes, you did breath work and got your sleep and everything, but the breath work and the sleep will only be Band-Aids until you find the source and find what that source was. Now, you can't change what the source was, whatever your source of the anxiety was. It could have just been growing up, bullying, I don't know what happened to cause, but I assume that you worked on, okay, this is coming from somewhere. And that's key, coming from somewhere. And once you understand that, you can't change where it's, you can't change the source if someone bullied you or whatever. I'm just giving that as an example, but you can change how it's plays out into your future. Yeah. So an experience will create a network that's toxic will generate signals of anxiety, depression, generate behavioral changes, generate perspectives on life changes that we can never win or whatever, generate changes in how we actually respond to people in our body, etc. So once you recognize those signals and you start finding the source, then you can reconstruct. Then the breath work and those kinds of things will be sustainable. Otherwise, they become Band-Aids. They turn from a Band-Aid into part of your healing system. And that's what's really key. It relates to the question you asked me earlier on, what makes the difference between someone who chooses to get the knowledge, go deeper, apply, etc., etc. You have to find your reason, and then you have to make the choice to reconstruct. So many people get stuck in the source and take on a victim mentality, which is spoken about so much in this current environment, that it's my mother's fault, it's my father's fault, it's the teacher's fault, it's this one's. And yes, we can find the source, and yes, there is the cause of things that are maybe toxic and negative, and we're not going to excuse that. But once you know that, if you stay there, you'll never heal. You have to move forward. Otherwise, you will stay with that hovering anxiety for the rest of your life. It'll just keep getting worse.
Yeah, you might find this interesting, and I never really thought about it like this. So what I realized, if I was sort of analyzing myself, would be that I was instinctively comparing myself to others. It sort of happened at that time when you're near the end of high school. You've got 2 or 3 years left in high school where they tell you that how you perform on these exams and the subjects that you choose is going to determine what university program you get into, which is going to determine the rest of your life. So
Very
if you feel
pressurizing.
Exactly. So if you feel like you're not at a great level and you're friends with people who are performing very well academically, or if you have an older brother like I did who performed very well academically and a very successful father who had a bit of a public profile at the time, I just felt like I wasn't even at that level, even though they weren't the things that I was consciously processing. It just manifested for me in different ways, that comparison. And it was only once I sort of went through the process that you mentioned there without realizing that that's what I was doing. Because as I started to get all of those things dialed in, reading every book that I could find on happiness, success, mindset, relationships, I wanted nutrition, sleep.
Amazing.
I wanted to learn everything, and that put me in motion. And that was when I had my first public speaking opportunity, which someone who had been struggling with debilitating anxiety, the thought of speaking in front of 600 people.
That's amazing.
For my first big presentation, they said no notes, no PowerPoint presentation. And I was going on before Stephen Bradbury, who was a Winter Olympic Games gold medalist. And I thought, wow, this is the perfect storm for anxiety. This is going to be an absolute disaster. But I practiced like crazy and got on there, and, I'm sure it was fine. I was able to get through it okay. And it was the most exhilarating feeling after. And as a combination of all of these different things that put me in motion, it got me on that successful trajectory, which meant that it would have limited those feelings of comparison that I had, because I felt like I was on my way. And then the anxiety started to erode, which meant then that those Band-Aid things, stuff like the breath work and nutrition and all the other stuff, all contributed to being able to get rid of it almost completely. Yep,
so there you go. You found the source. You deconstructed. You were aware of your signals. And we have 4 categories of signals. You were aware of your emotions of anxiety and how it was affecting your behaviors and whatever. And you tracked it back down to the source, which was that comparison. Could you live up to that standard? And I mean, this is not an uncommon thing, but it's very real. and it impacted you, and you had to reconstruct. So once you found the source, you could then reconstruct and rebuild your own identity, which is what you've done. It doesn't mean, I'm sure you still get assailed by some of those feelings from time, which is normal because there's new challenges but you can go back to your identity. And that's so huge in this world of comparison. When you said the comparison thing, it just made me think of, how much there is in today's world with social media. There is a huge, comparison problem. You look at that next person, well, I should be doing that. And we've all fallen into that trap. But it's very restrictive, but it's very real. But if we can recognize that there's something you can do that no one else on this planet can do, and you make a lousy someone else, the minute we get that, we can start moving forward. And instead of then the comparison being something that cripples us, we can look at that and think, well, why has that post by that person or what that person is achieving, why has that affected me? So be curious, stand back and observe and be curious, which taps into the depths of your unconscious mind, which is where wisdom, insight, intuition, and everything else that's great live, intelligence, etc. Then, so you treat it not as, I feel terrible, I'm not going to make it. You shift that and you say, this is very interesting. I'm having feelings of jealousy, comparison, making me feel bad about myself, whatever, envy. I'm not going to be threatened. I'm going to actually see that it's data. What is this lacking? What in me am I looking for? What is it telling me? And if you explore, you will find the answers because we have everything inside of us. And you'll find that in you that no one else can do. And that's amazing. If we look at it that way, me enhancing you is good for me because you can do something that I can't do. But if I lift you up, research shows that the minute I lift someone else up, I improve my own functioning by 68% and even more. But we live in a world that says, bring that person down, let's stomp on them just in case or stand on them or whatever, because they're going to beat us. So it's a shift to understand that whole comparison thing. I know we've shifted over to the comparison thing, but it's so massive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's such a, winning the day comparison. If you start your day comparing, you've already lost the day.
Absolutely. And the only times I really feel that anxiety these days is when I have a big professional commitment while I'm feeling very physically run down. Maybe the kids have been sick. Maybe I'm traveling and just, didn't get a great sleep in the hotel room.
So you're vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you've had long plane flights and all some type of, all that stuff.
But then you know that. So
yeah, exactly.
If you know that, and that's when also in those states of vulnerability, when all the intrusive thoughts come and they just come pounding at your door, and that's and they hit one in the middle of the morning or in the middle of the night or something. That's why, as I said earlier on, it's so important that you immediately stop and have a process in place for capturing and organizing those thoughts. Otherwise, they overwhelm and create such a lot of disruption in your literal brainwaves. I mean, we use brainwave technology to do our neuroscience research, but you can literally think of waves of the sea, just this chaotic. And when that happens, all your hormones go off and everything just goes out of balance. And then we get consumed with how we're feeling and it makes us feel worse. But you don't have to get that far. You can actually catch it. And in 63 seconds, literally, you can start changing. Yeah. You can catch those in the moment situations that can block you. Yeah. So the vulnerability aspect, I'm so glad you brought that up because comparison, what you brought up earlier on, is important. The vulnerability, when we're vulnerable from tiredness, not resting, in our performative society, this constantly hustle culture, we wear busyness as a badge of honor. We don't know how to rest. You go on holiday and you don't know how to rest. Everyone I talk to is talking about this. I'm sure you having the same thing, James. People ask me about this all the time. There isn't a person that's not saying something about this. So if we don't restore, we're vulnerable. And so that's another, to answer earlier questions, our vulnerability will increase our toxic thought load and our inability to manage and will create that negative mindsets. So it's very important we tune into our vulnerable states and not just rest, but actually restore. And then that's another whole discussion, but it's very important.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. You mentioned finding the source for anxiety there, and I know this is a very difficult thing for people to even figure out where to begin. Do you have any tips for people to be able to get an understanding of what is this source, or what might it be, or any clues to get them started on the journey so they can?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because this is where, this has been my life's work, is what is a thought and how does a thought form? So a thought is an experience. Experience is made of details. This is an experience. All our words are the details. So experience has details. It builds into a thought with memories. So all our words are memories in thoughts. So we create that with our mind. You and I interacting now, we're creating that with our mind, then we're coding that into our brain, and it's all happening at 400 billion actions per second. Okay, so I'll say that just to sort of summarize what I said earlier on. So thoughts are real things. We have trillions of them. So if I have now spent time comparing or spent time operating in a vulnerable state, just to use two of the examples that we've already created, already those are going to create a lot of feelings of I can't cope, etc., etc. So what can one do first? The first thing is to recognize that we have this incredible power to be able to stand back and observe ourselves. It's called the multiple perspective advantage. It's a neuroplasticity concept. It's this ability we have in our mind, which is you, your mind is you, your aliveness, to stand back and observe how you're functioning. So in this moment right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm very aware of how I'm sitting, how my hands are moving, how my tone of voice. I'm very aware of what you're doing, etc. I can observe, and I'm watching myself because I've chosen in this moment to become very aware of how I'm expressing myself. That's what I'm talking about. Until I said that, I was aware, but not as aware as I am now. So the point I'm making is that you can choose to increase your awareness level, and that's the multiple perspective advantage. You step into a zone where you can see things from multiple perspectives. The minute you do that, you move out of just a conscious state, which is a very limited state. It's very limited logic, limited intelligence, limited thinking, feeling, choosing. And you add another dimension, and that dimension is the non-conscious state. And the non-conscious state is where we have infinite brilliance, infinite creativity, imagination, intuition, insight, wisdom, where all the solutions, the problems and the solutions are. That's the level that we all instinct have. It's part of us. It's our true you, perfect you, whatever you want to call it. But if I get stuck in that conscious state, if I get stuck in a toxic, vulnerable, comparative, toxic, intrusive thought state, I'm going to increase my anxiety, and I'm not going to really see the full picture. The minute I say, okay, I recognize I'm feeling this anxiety, let me stand back for a moment, I open the door to this level, this wonderful level. Then what I can do is say objectively, okay, let me see, what are my emotions? So step number one is to gather awareness of your emotions, to gather awareness of 4 signals that operate together all the time. The first one are your emotional signals. And those are whatever, anxiety, depression, and we spoke about anxiety, so let's take anxiety as our example. It's not a disease. It is a fantastic aid to your functioning. It is an emotional support system. It tells you stuff about yourself. If you learn to look at it in the face, you will learn stuff about yourself that will guide you into the next step and help you win the day, to just, steal my corner of my eye. If you see it as a problem, it'll tip you over and it's chaos. Okay, so it's a warning signal giving you data. Great friend if you use it properly. Emotional warning signals always show up somewhere in the body. So it's good to pinpoint where in the body. So second thing is, I'm feeling anxiety. Where am I feeling it? Maybe it's just this tightness in your chest. Maybe it's a gut ache. Maybe it is your shoulders are tensing. So just notice where it is and notice, sort of, kind of rank it. Okay. Then the third thing is, now, how does this affect my perspective? How am I looking at life in this moment? Not yesterday, next week, in the next now. It's making me think I can't get through the next moment or whatever, or this always happens, something like that. What's the statement? And the fourth thing is, how is this likely to affect my behaviors in the next moment? Am I going to get snappy and irritable? Am I going to withdraw? Am I going to go down a whole road of toxic thoughts of I can't, this won't, whatever? So just observe them. So you stand back and you observe those. You ask yourself 4 questions. Once you've done that, what you've done is you've actually found that thought network, because every thought becomes a physical, energetic, protein, chemical network through the mind, which is all around you and through you, and that's the energy level. And then in the brain and the body, the energy becomes proteins and chemicals and electromagnetic flows, etc. So it's a network, like wires and that kind of thing, just to help people visualize, like our own internal World Wide Web. So it will so those will pull up or shine the spotlight in the relevant cluster. As soon as that happens on a neuroscientific level, it's happening non-consciously, it weakens the power of that network. If I don't do what I've just said, if I don't stand back into that multiple perspective advantage, and if I don't observe those 4 signals, and if I don't do that, then that network doesn't get the light shone on it. It pops up for a bit because some information will pop up, the data of the thought will pop up, but you don't deal with it, so it goes back even stronger than before. So as soon as you become aware of something, and this is where breathing and meditation alone are dangerous because it brings up stuff, but if you don't process what you brought up, they go back stronger than before. So that's why breathing and meditation are fantastic. I use them, but if you use them in the wrong place, they make things worse. Okay, so we'll talk about that after I've gone through these steps. Okay, so this gather awareness of these 4 signals has brought this network up on a neurophysiological level and weakened its power. Now, you're not seeing that, but that's what's happening. That's the neuroscience, and that's great. It's giving you control back. Then you go into the next phase, very phased. Neuroplasticity I'm talking about directed neuroplasticity in these steps that I'm explaining. This is a directed neuroplasticity technique, formula, not technique, it's a formula, because you can put techniques into it, and it's called the Neurocycle. And essentially what you're doing is neuroplasticity, as we mentioned earlier on, is the ability that the mind has to change these networks. It's happening all day long. Whether you like it or not, you are always building life into your brain and body. That's what happens. But if you don't control it, you're building chaos. Chaotic mind, chaotic brain, chaotic body, chaotic life. So what I'm saying is, okay, that's the case. We can rewire the chaos, but we can also we can preempt chaos. We can do both. And so when we know that so this system has been, I've got a theory, 40 years of research, clinical trials, clinical application. This formula is how you redirect neuroplasticity in the direction you want it to go. So you stand back, do the 4 signals. Then the second step is you start reflecting. And reflection is, if you think of shining a white light through a prism, it comes out with all these colors on the other side. It's depth. So what is the depth? What are these 4 signals have brought up something? What is the detail? So the second step is bringing up the detail. So in other words, it's bringing up that thought, not just the name of the thought or the thoughts. It's bringing up the thought with the detail. So you're starting to see stuff, and you're asking who, what, when, where, why. So it's giving you details. Then you move to the third phase. So it's very organized. And the third phase is a mind storm, where you just say, okay, what else is coming up? I've got these 4 signals. I've started reflecting on what the potential why, who, what, when, where, triggers, etc. What else does this bring up? Just let that flow, and all kinds of, so what you've done is you've opened the door to the non-conscious, you've opened that network, and now the details of the network are coming into your mind, conscious mind. And that means you can change it. You're getting power over it. If it's hidden, you have no power. It controls you. So the third step is very powerful. Then the fourth step is to say, okay, there's all this data. Now, what does it mean? It's called a recheck. It's reconceptualizing. This has happened. What can I do? How can I see this differently, et cetera, et cetera? And you work out a plan. And then the fifth step is action. What am I going to do? And that's called a neurocycle. Now you can do that in 63 seconds, and you can change the momentary. That's what this book, Help in a Hurry, basically explains, how to catch the moment. But if you're catching a lot of moments, that means there's a pattern, which means there's a habit. So therefore, you're going to now have to rewire a habit. So in other words, I can catch that, and I can catch that, and I can catch that. But if I keep catching the same thing, I'm not really dealing with the problem. So now I need to go deeper. I need to recognize that is a pattern. It takes about 7 days to identify those patterns that are the most disruptive. Then you select one at a time, because a pattern is a thought, and the thought's got lots of details. You might have 1,000 memories in that thought. So you work on, one thought with all its memories, and you take that neurocycle over a period of time. So I researched how long does it really take to break a habit and to build a new one. And it doesn't take 21 days. That's a myth. It was not proper science. Stuff does happen. You do a lot of deconstruction and reconstruction, but the problem is it's not stabilized. So if you stop after 21 days, you're going to find that you're going to revert back. So what you have to do is stabilize that new thought, and it's an up and down journey of stabilization. So for example, by day 36, you have increased insight. So you look back in the past and you see more and reasons why, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to go through all these phases. It's a journey. And then you hit this point around about 63 days in, somewhere between 59 and 63 days, where there's been enough mind work to change protein structure. So those proteins I spoke about that became loosened, Some of those branches that are toxic are weakening, and new ones that are healthy are building, and eventually the toxic part shrinks down to a small little piece, and we've got this healthy new network formed around it. You don't just rip it out. I wish we could just rip the thoughts out, but you can't. You actually deconstruct and reconstruct, and that process is going to take a full at least 63 days. Now, if it's an abusive situation or a very traumatic situation, it will be multiple cycles because there's so many different moving parts. But it's basically this 5-step process, which is a formula that you apply over time, at least 63 days. And in that book over there, I explain that. And I have courses as well. We have a course we just released.
Yeah, we'll link to that in the show notes. Yep.
Yeah, and it's great. It's 21-day brain detox where I teach people how to do it. I have an app where I literally give them therapy. The courses, the app take you through this, the moment, the short moment plus the long moment. So I know there's a lot I'm saying, but these tools, you don't have to go to, you don't have to, the materials in the books, there's courses, etc., teaching people how to do this. And this is a life skill. This is not just for people battling with trauma. This is for humanity. Every day, every single one of us is battling with something. We've got to know how to catch the moment. We've got to know how to catch the patterns. And one of the things that I did in my work relating to how to deal with all the stuff and deal with anxiety, which was your question, for example, some tips, and I've given you a lot. One of the big tips that I can also give is that we did a survey and research, and the top 18 areas currently that people are really battling with are things like pressure. I feel under so much pressure, black and white thinking, that it's this or that. It's either this or that, but you can have and. I can't feel grief and sorrow at the same time. I can't do you can't, we are brilliant. We can do the and, but black and white thinking is very limiting. People pleasing, imposter syndrome. And those are in this book. I identify the top 18 and give you quick, sort of in the moment, 63-second solutions to handle that. And so that's how we handle those momentary anxieties before they build. But as I said, if you have a pattern, you really need to be doing it over 63 days. So all of us I'm always in a 63-day neurocycle because there's always something that raises its head from the past. We've got a lot of history, all of us, that we need to be working on.
Yeah. And what about the role of emotion? So there's a quote from Jim Rohn, which I love. He said, disgust can be a powerful motivator. And that was for me in my own life. And I looked in the mirror and I just, I was disgusted at the reflection that was staring back at me when I was very young. And I was like, wow, that was a really important moment for me to be able to say, yes, I will take ownership of my life. So for someone who's maybe experiencing disgust or shame, are they more likely to stick with a new habit, especially compared to, say, a positive emotion? If someone's like ambitious or happy, being like, look, this is just something I want to do, versus something that I am disgusted and something has to happen, versus those who don't really have any emotion at all. Like, would that play a role in how likely they are to succeed with a new habit?
Oh, definitely. So everyone's always got emotions. So they'll be in a neutral state, or they'll be in a very toxic state, or they'll be in a healthy state. So there's sort of kind of the three, and then obviously it's a scale. And all emotions are good. They're all because they're giving you data. Where they become negative is when they're not managed. For someone to succeed is managing it. So you can have disgust, and total shame, which are big emotions that come from something that's a big impact experience. And a high impact experience is like a tsunami in your mind, which becomes a very toxic looking, ugly network with lots of feelings, because we saw throughout our body. So that's why we know the body does keep the score. We've all heard that. But that's not, the body doesn't keep it forever. It's what you do next. That's really, really important, which comes back to environment question earlier on. So therefore, it does impact you, but you don't have to stay there. And labels and things lock us into those states. What we have, when we go into that multiple perspective advantage situation, it's the ability to say, okay, I stand back. I am not disgust. I am not shame. I am feeling disgust. I am feeling shame because of. That's the key. I've got it because of, and then doing that work, which is hard. I mean, there's going to be tears, there's going to be increased anxiety and so on. It will get worse before it gets better. But the shift with someone who moves forward is not getting consumed by that emotion. It's recognizing this is not who I am. This is something that's data. It has a source. I can go to that source and I can decide how I want that to change in the future. That's absolutely key to make disgust work for you, make shame work for you, not against you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. If someone is in a relationship, and their spouse is perhaps taking actions, maybe it's addiction, maybe they're just so demotivated, and you want that person to be able to really change in their behavior in a good way, is there something that they can do to enable that positive behavioral change in a spouse?
I wish that I could say absolutely yes to that. So there's yes and yes. There's yes. The first yes is obviously there's always love and support, always will, win the day, literally. Surrounding someone with that. But at the end of the day, you can't change anyone. That is just part of our psychoneurobiology. It's part of who we are as humans. And psychoneurobiology means mind, brain, body connection, means mind. So 99% is mind. Choice is think, feel, choose is dominant. I think, I feel, I choose. Not I can't choose for you. So I can stand by your side and I can help you with that addiction. I can give you all the techniques and tools. I can give you all the love and support. I can speak you through the depression. I can give you reconceptualizations. I can show you and I can load you with knowledge. It's this data question we spoke about earlier on. And it can all come in and it's just all these little packets of information, but nothing is really allowed to deeply penetrate. We block that. Each of us blocks that support with our own choices. So unfortunately, it's important for us to love, to support, and to give as much support as we can, but you can't fix someone, you can't change someone. You've got to keep trying, you've got to have hope. But you can't co-regulate, you've got to be careful of creating codependency. You've got to, because that kind of situation can also feed into narcissistic type relationships, can lead into abusive and manipulative type relationships. And it's very hard when it's a loved one. It's incredibly difficult. So you never want to give up hope and you always want to support. But at the end of the day, you have to recognize that if they don't take your advice and they do go down the addiction pathway or whatever pathway they go down, you've done what you can do. We can walk alongside, but unfortunately we can't change. And I know we know that, but the science is there to support that because they're inherently in all of us. When you love someone, I could have done something more. Is there not more I could have done? So you put everything into it with all your love, but be careful of trying to force someone to do something. You can only model, support, suggest, and hope that they will make the choice to change and keep on encouraging. But you have to protect yourself as well. There may come a point where things slip over into an abusive, manipulative, narcissistic or whatever. And then it may be important to create the boundaries. Because very often when you're supporting in that extent, the boundaries get very blurred and you start absorbing things into you and areas, our zones get muddled, and that can be very distressful and very harmful to both. And then you can lose the ability to help the other person.
Yeah, and when it comes to behavioral change, I feel like parents wanting to motivate their kids is such a big one. It's a question that I've gotten a lot from people. It's something that I've seen with a lot of the people that I've worked with, where particularly with teenage, young adult children, where they're like, I just want this person to be more motivated, to feel like they have more agency, take more ownership of their life. You've had 4 kids, is that right?
Yes.
4 kids. You've been
2
through it all. And how many grandkids?
2.
2 grandkids. Awesome. Is there anything that you've been able to apply to parenting from all of the work that you've done, or is that one of those things where obviously you've got to set a good example and there are things to focus on? But yeah, are there any tips that you haven't shared so far that have helped inform your parenting journey?
Well, I've got a book out called How to Help Your Children Clean Up Their Mental Mess. So that's based on all my years of clinical and parenting experience. But in a nutshell, one of the statements that one of our daughters said to me, oh gosh, I think she was about 16. She turned around to me and she said, Mom, one of the greatest things you've ever taught us is how to think. And for me, that was the breakthrough, because if I can teach, and that's been my goal. Yes, we've made up every parent. I always say every parent messes up their kids because we come into every relationship with damage, and this is okay. It's part of normal parenting. Obviously, I'm not talking about the abusive level, but we will come with our own baggage. We will impact our kids. We're going to give them wonderful things, but we're also going to come through with our own issues, and that does impact them. So every child has the right to love and support and understand that a parent has come into the parenting with their baggage, but they also have the right to work on the impact. So I want to say that up front, that it's important we work on the impact, and that's not the black and white thinking thing. Yeah. Or you can love and you can still be upset at the same time. Okay. So that's very important, is to recognize that you as a parent will impact your children. There is no perfect, because we're all learning, and our learning comes out in our parenting. And we need to give ourselves grace, as well as giving our children grace, as well as our children giving us grace. And that requires us as parents to not only teach us, and I'll come back to the think thing, but on this level, let them tell you things. Let them tell you, Mom, you said this when I was this age, and they may be 18 and they remember an incident of when they were 3 and it came up somehow in something that triggered it, let them come to you, even if it's really hard to hear that. Let them tell you, Mom, you did this, you did that, you said this, you said that, this is how it impacted me, whatever words they use. It's very hard. Listen, don't justify, and acknowledge, and then say, okay, I can see that really is impacting you, and I'm so sorry. I remember that time. Is it okay if I give you, not to justify, because I understand it was wrong and it did impact you. Can I explain the circumstances around that? Not to excuse what I've done, and I will do everything I can to help you get through this, to help rectify what I did wrong. But I'd love to just give you some context for why that happened. So in other words, you're teaching compassion, you're teaching empathy, you're teaching modeling. That is incredibly important. So that's that part. The think part is encourage your children to question. We'd sit at dinner tables in restaurants and be the noisiest family and I remember going overseas because we travel a lot and people looking at us because we're always talking. It's we're challenging. It's not arguing. It's very Italian family, but it's let them question. Let them, why do you say that, Mom? And don't be threatened. Well, I said it. That's not the answer. Let them question. Let them think. Encourage them. Even if you don't agree, learn to debate, so thinking, that's what my daughter was saying. Teach them, you taught us how to think. Question everything.
You mentioned context there. That's such a big one, right? We can have these feelings about how we feel like we've been so wronged. And the moment additional context is provided, it completely flips the script.
Totally.
Like, so an example might be, I remember driving to take my wife to hospital when she was having our baby for the first time. We were going to be parents for the first time, and we were driving because, my wife was not in a good way. We had to get to hospital. So if someone had seen me in that state, I would have looked like a real asshole. But if they met me in a different situation, it would have been a vastly different, scenario. So having context, being able to provide that with your kids, but it also encourages them. They can't understand the context without listening. No. So it forces them to listen, to learn the context, which then teaches empathy.
Yeah, it does. Totally. Yeah. And then you're also teaching them how to think and question at the same time. So they're learning empathy, they're learning conversational technique and modeling. That's the third one. Essentially modeling. Kids read things from very young. They can tell tone. A 2-year-old, they've even shown babies can pick up when you're upset. It's very important, obviously, age appropriately. But if you're upset about something, it's better not to hide it because they will immediately think it's them. And it doesn't matter. It can be your 30-year-old. And if you don't, and you've got a sort of look on your face or something, or there's no emoji in a text and they say, what's wrong? Don't deny things because they will immediately think it's something that they've done wrong. There's just something about that parent-child bond. So in other words, be honest and work through it. Say, this has been a really tough day. I'm battling because this and this happened. You can use the whole process of the Neurocycle. These happened. It made me feel like this. This is how I'm going to deal with it. Maybe they've got some advice, but it's not denying it. And obviously, if it's a little child, you just, Mommy's not feeling so great today because I had someone at work who shouted at me. And you'll find your child will come up and say, oh, shame, Mommy, I'm so sorry. And they often will give you a solution. They'll often reconceptualize for you. But you haven't walked in the door, suppress that anger from your boss, or upsetness from the boss that yelled at you or the colleague that did whatever. And now you're hiding it, but you're not hiding it. It comes out in you snapping at your child or whatever. So that's really important. Don't try and hide stuff. And if your child says to you, Mommy, what's wrong? Daddy, what's wrong? Answer them. Tell them age appropriately in a very simple way, but offer a solution. I'm working on it. This is what happened. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to work on it. Or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to talk to Dad about a way of or something. And that gives them a model. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be angry. But I don't stay there. I'm going to find a way of getting through. And it's safe to share. So many boomers and Gen X didn't have an opportunity to share. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are much better at sharing. But there's a lot of other things around that too. But we need to learn to share. A lot of men grew up as boomers and I hate to just categorize generations, but you always have generational patterns, gender issues, sexism, etc. Men mustn't cry. All these things that are just culturally wrong. We need to, as humans, be much more honest, open, and share and model. And that's very important for parenting. If you don't model it when they're kids and growing up, they're not going to reflect that in their relationships with their partners one day and work and parenting themselves.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at providing context for my kids, but I've never thought about it that they think it's them when I'm upset.
Oh, totally.
That's very, very interesting.
You just throw yourself into a position back, if you can recall something from childhood. You even said it earlier on. You said your dad was a successful public figure and a bit of a public persona and very great at what he did. And so if you did something, maybe didn't get the grades that you felt he needed you to get to be accepted, you were immediately taking that on. You were seeing his, whatever he said, as something that was something you did, you bad.
Yeah.
In some way, and I'm using one word, but it's somehow because it made you feel like you weren't good enough.
Makes sense.
That's, I bet you, and you've probably spoken to your dad about this, but if you talk to him, if you didn't, and if you did, he would say, oh my gosh, I never meant that. That's definitely, I've always thought you're good enough. But I was just trying to motivate you and give context, and then a communication starts, a dialogue starts. I mean, I've had parents in their 80s talking to their kids in their 30s and 40s, sorting out stuff that was misunderstandings. For 40 years, they had these misunderstandings. One can get those communication lines going.
Resentment builds, right? It's crazy. It's a big thing we talk about actually with the Win the Day work that I do, is initiating conversations that need to be had.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's such a big one, isn't it?
And there's a role one can play. You can apply the principles of neuroplasticity to a conversation to make it a healthy one. And when you feel those emotions swelling up, when you feel that hurt, when you feel something popping in your head, that person said that 6 years ago, but it's still popping up in my head. I can still hear that voice or something like that. Is that still happening? Are you still running from that? Do you need to have a conversation? Otherwise it's going to keep driving you.
Yeah.
And we live with so much of that, which is unnecessary. It drains our energy. And we have limited energy physically with our conscious mind and brain and body during the day. So, what do you want to spend that energy on?
Yeah. I remember it was so interesting you said there that the idea of kids wanting to help find solutions. There was a time when my 4-year-old daughter, I was nursing our son who was a baby at the time. He had a whole bunch of sleep issues and everything else. And I was just having a real, lack of sleep, all the fun stuff that happens when you're a parent. Yeah, exactly. And I had lost my cool, which rarely happens. It's the worst thing. You feel so bad and she had, my daughter who was 4 years old at the time, I heard these little footsteps run away back to her room, and I was like, she's gotten out of her room again is what I was thinking. And I realized she'd slipped something underneath the door, and I opened it up and she'd drawn a love heart on a piece of paper, and it literally brought me to tears. And I'll never forget that. So that was her way of trying to find a solution, knowing that I was upset and tired.
It's unreal. I remember when I was still practicing clinically and I bring families into the clinic and we work through things, and you'd have a mom sit down and I'd say, okay, let's model now. You're really battling. Tell your child, sit down and go through the process. And those children would go up and take the mom by the face and say, oh, mom, and give a solution. Like, as you say, a 3 and a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
When you open that door and then you're teaching them that model, that's how they will then move through. And
they can often have the best solutions too. They have a good way of simplifying life.
It's very simple. Because, they're so in tune with their non-conscious. There's often a lot of talk about how young children are so spiritual. Because and that's your non-conscious level. They haven't got all those layers yet, and they haven't got stuck in the conscious mind yet. So they're very in tune with wisdom.
Yeah.
Very in tune.
Is there a scientific discovery or an advancement just around the corner that you're really excited about?
I am very, very excited about the fact that the biomedical model is being questioned, because it's taken away a lot of our humanity, and it's taken all the huge complexities of life and lumped it into the diagnoses, as we've said. There's a huge challenge to that model, and a lot of research. People are not scared to talk about consciousness research anymore. In the last 50 years, the media's really focused on brain, as I've said. Now there's a lot more on, is the brain the final solution? Let's get back to mind. Let's get back to what we've been saying for 2,000 years and what Hippocrates said. So that's and then research on that. There's research confirming that consciousness exists beyond the physical body, whatever that looks like. That's 99.9% accuracy that consciousness exists beyond. So there's a lot of work going on in that area, which is very interesting because it relates to my work in the unconscious mind, which I've been doing for 40 years. So I'm very excited about that. There's definitely a shift happening in science.
Yeah, it's amazing how much
direction.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we ruined in the last century. Things that were known for thousands of years.
We got out of balance. Yeah. We took great research. The brain research has been phenomenal. But then we said there's been super things said like the heart is the organ when you have heart problems, the heart is what you look at if you have cardiovascular issues. And then people say, well, the brain is if you have mental issues. It's the worst statement that's been made. It's the one that has held back advancement and development in mental health the most, that thinking. And that's shifting. That I'm very excited about. But it's true. Science advances one funeral at a time.
Yeah, that's right. And last question now before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
I can handle this.
Love it. Let's now move to the Win the Day rocket round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one?
I'm up for it.
Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
You read a quote at the beginning of this.
If you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought. Yeah.
Or you'd manage it. I would change that quote slightly so you'd manage it. But, I know what he's saying there. But that for me was an inspiration for my work because I used that in one of my first books nearly 30 years ago that I wrote.
Yeah, brilliant. Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Morning coffee. Coffee all day, even at night.
Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Get to know yourself. Believe in yourself. Really tune into the depths because you can handle it. You would maybe summarize it as there's something you can do. This is better. There's something you can do that no one else can do. Mm. And to really believe that because that's so much as you just described earlier on as well. That's really an age where people can question.
Mm. Number 4, what book do you gift the most or that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
I couldn't even name just one. There's so many books. That's a hard one for me.
Yeah. Plus you have recency bias too, right? You read something new and you're like, oh, that's really, really good.
So every one I read is, this is the book. I have too many. I have such a big library of books. I wouldn't even be able to. I get asked that question so often and my answer is always the same. There's too many.
I agree. I've never read a book that didn't change my life in some way. So.
Exactly. And there's some that I've got a very long list of what's really great.
Yeah. Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Oh, definitely letting toxic thoughts cascade and consume, and then learning how to, it's a superpower, to know how to manage intrusive thoughts and to turn them into constructive. Oh my gosh, it's phenomenal, friend.
Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
I don't believe that it's failed. I've learned what not to do. That's the phrase I was trying to get. So failure is not failure. I've learned what not to do.
Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
Einstein.
Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Oh, the Neurocycle. It's become the formula. I love it. Yeah. It's because I understand what it's doing. It makes my mind work, and my mind's 99% of who I am, and I need my mind working. Working well.
We all need your mind working too. Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
Oh gosh, I got so many. Traveling more we've traveled extensively, but actually I want to traveling with the family, but the other one is we have a huge goal to change the mental health rehabilitation system globally. It's a mess. Yeah. It's really making people worse and more ill so that's a huge thing to change the rehabilitation system.
Yeah, very important mission. And last question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
Manage my mind. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds repetitive, but mind is 99%. If I don't manage my mind, I'm a mess all day.
And you got to walk the walk. If you're not doing it, then none of us will.
Exactly.
Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Dr. Caroline Leaf, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow her on Instagram at Dr. Caroline Leaf. Visit her website, drleaf.com. We'll also include a link to the new course that they have released and grab a copy of her many books on Amazon. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Caroline, what a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, James. I loved your questions and it was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.